Thank you, Angeliki. Thank you, Paul. Slightly misleading my introduction there as Teach for All and LeadersQuest. My last 20 years has been spent leading a private equity firm. A private equity firm that is invested in the emerging markets. The connection here is the investment bit, not the emerging markets to Greece. You know, what I would say is the work that People's Trust are doing is wonderful, essential. But pick up on one of your comments, Paul. You know, goodness me, what could you do with 20 times as much money there? My picture of the world is that I run a firm that's managed the institutional money that seems so elusive. We've invested equity in principally family-owned businesses around the emerging markets from China, India, Africa, Latin America, and indeed one investment here in Greece. And one myth I'd like to deal with right up front is, with one exception, I've never met a country that hasn't had economic, regulatory, political issues. And I've never met a country that we have not been prepared to invest in and successfully. So let's sort of put to one side the sense of gloom and doom around Greece as an investment destination. If the opportunities are there, the capital will come. And indeed, the one investment that we have made as a firm is represented here at the forum with the CEO and is very successful. So, but how to draw some thoughts about what makes a successful SME, turn it into an SME that's grown up, indeed, and become successful and become a significant part of the economy. And with that, maybe I could tell a story. And I go back to October 2012. And the rhythm of an investment business is that you spend time thinking in a thoughtful way about what to invest in. And we did that every week, every Tuesday. And the Friday before that, you'd get the papers for the upcoming week. And I went home that weekend, and on Sunday I looked, well, okay, that's interesting. Egypt. Egypt, October 2012. You think, well, for those of you who are keen students, you'll know that that was shortly after a new president had been appointed there. So this was the definition of political turmoil. And I read on. I read further, and I read a story. And I read a story about an Egyptian gentleman who, in 1996, had reached across the water to a Greek friend, a close Greek friend of his, to establish a business. And the Egyptian gentleman, and he had spent a career in the food industry, and he was probably about 36 years old. And his idea was that he thought that Egyptians would enjoy eating croissants. More importantly, chocolate croissants. And that was his picture. I am going to sell the best chocolate croissants to Egyptians. But actually, I don't know how to make these things. My Greek friend, he knows how to make them. So we're going to go into business together, into a small business. And that's what they did. They started making chocolate croissants in Cairo and selling them through the informal economy. I read on, and I thought, well, okay, this is interesting. And I started looking at what had gone on between 1996 and 2012. And what you saw here was a picture of extraordinary growth. Because as it turned out, he was right. Egyptians they wanted to eat chocolate croissants. Not only did they want to eat chocolate croissants, they wanted to eat a lot of other snack foods. And he did this really, really well. And 2012, the invitation was, he thought it was time to realize some of the investments, a bit like the sale to Daimler. Time to move on to the next challenge. And so we came and we had an opportunity to invest in this. And if I say to you that he did very, very well, many tens of millions of dollars changed hand from the starting position of chocolate croissants. If you then bring the story completely up to date, the business was listed on the Egyptian Stock Exchange. It was the best ever listing on the stock exchange, and it is now one of the largest companies in that sector in Egypt. So what's there to tell about this tale of success, and try and draw some thoughts out? Because that investment sits alongside a suite of many, many other investments that we made, and just trying to draw some threads of what made them all great. The first thing to say is you've got to have a great leader. No business ever succeeded without a great leader. And a great business without a great leader is not a good business, simply put. And that, I'm sure, was true of Taxi Beats. Yeah? Great leaders, however, do not make great managers every time. So every time we saw a business that was successful, we looked through the great leadership. We looked through the inspiration, which you need, and said, is there someone who can actually make the trains run on time, as I used to say? Someone who can actually bring management to this business. Because you've got to get away, ultimately, from the $10,000 loan from People's Trust in the informal economy. And you've got to actually get to a place where you are willing, able to put yourself to the scrutiny of outside investors. You've got to have a dream. We never invested in a business that I can remember where the CEO, the founder, the family member, the entrepreneur didn't have a dream. Paul's here has got a dream. He doesn't want to just have one family funding People's Trust. He wants to have many families. So if you're going to have a great business, you've got to have a dream. And you're going to have to think big. And that's one of the characteristics I've drawn in all of my 48 hours here in Greece is, you know, where are the people who are going to dream big about this economy? And what's to be done here? I'm reasonably sensitized to the difficulties of the economy. But dreams are important. There's no point investing in a business that you have a dream about that's going to go big, that doesn't have resilient demand. That's a statement of truth. Paul's view on the world, which is not a statement of truth, is I love businesses where you sell lots of little things to lots of people. The risk goes down. The risk goes up, as indeed I think we're discovering in the world of Taxi Beats, as soon as you start introducing government and regulation into your life. As soon as you have the possibility that your business can be interrupted by government or regulation, I'm thinking trouble. If you can be in the business of selling to real consumers, whether it's in your own country, in our adjacent countries, in the export markets, as it happens, the business that we invested in here in Greece is Greek-led, Greek inspiration, Greek technology, actually supplying around the world into the emerging markets and very, very small denominations via mobile phones around Africa and Latin America. I think about the willingness of families. Typically, successful businesses are family founded, they may be family funded. Are they willing, if you are the owner of the business, to share your success, to grow? If you're going to invite someone to be a shareholder to help you grow, to get out of the SME space to the bigger space, you've got to be prepared to allow that fellow traveler to make money. It sounds like a very obvious statement, but so many family owners think, I'm going to stand on the shoulders of this money. And I'm going to go to the stars, but he who comes with me, well, he's not really along for the journey here. So successful businesses treat incoming investors as partners. And select your partner wisely. Governance. You know, when I started 20 years ago, I was a product of a bank and started running this investment firm. The word governance to me sounded as if it was something to be ignored because it sounded incredibly boring. I would say that in order to move from informal to formal, you have to embrace the idea that you're going to have processes that surround your business. No one is going to come and give you either debt in significant amounts, or more importantly, equity in significant amounts, unless you have a governance structure around your business. Most people equate that to being a board and a chairman, and that's a decent shorthand. But within the business, do you run this with integrity? You know, is this ethically sound? Do you keep financial books that are honest and true? These are all questions of small businesses where the temptation is to cut corners. And maybe my last observation here is I've never yet found a business that succeeded that didn't have a deep emotional commitment to excellence. Whatever it is, you've got to be doing it really, really well and be striving to do it really, really well 24/7. So inspiration does count for a bit. Perspiration counts for an awful lot. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Paul. And also thank you for bringing the notion of a dream into the discussion, because we started out with very pessimistic facts and we ended up with the idea that we still have to dream. So there's a whole world in between. I would like to ask a question. How much time do we have left? Because this is a bit misleading. Okay, so we could ask a question to each speaker and then perhaps have some time for questions from the floor. So, Kevin, starting with you, one of the things that were discussed this morning was change, how we bring about change and how we innovate. And we had an interesting side discussion yesterday about R&D. And I would like to ask, stemming from what you have learned from working with the Greek, research environment here, about that and how it affects entrepreneurship.
Right. Well, thank you for that. What you're referring to is that for 4 years I was member of the Greek National Research and Technology Council, and that's exposed me to the issues of collaboration between the research infrastructure in Greece and private entrepreneurs. And one of the very striking features was, of course, the relatively low investment in Greece in R&D, but also the highly problematic relationship between state-funded universities, state-funded research centers, state-funded research institutes across the country, and collaboration with the private sector in innovative areas. But the positive aspect was that I was struck very much by a number of areas where Greece had distinct advantages, and that therefore there is much potential for progress. I think in terms of certain areas of IT, marine biology, a number of different areas in Greece where there is really exceptional potential. But it comes, I think, and I want to try to say it neutrally, but it comes back to this issue of the collaboration between the public and the private sectors. I remember one of the most striking experiences having a presentation of how the European Union was supporting collaboration between the public and private sector, R&D and SMEs. We had a map of 28 European Union countries, and there was a pin in the map for those projects supported by the European Union. The scheme was called Synergasia. And in Greece, there was just the one red dot in the map. Latvia, Lithuania were obliterated by lots of red dots. So the serious point, I think, here is of course, the need to support R&D, but also to perhaps reorientate, refocus, and change cultural attitudes in the publicly funded university research infrastructure in Greece in favor of collaboration. That is, that for science, for technology, engaging with private enterprise is not something which is a kind of theoretical aspect or something which is in other respects vulgar, but is necessary to encourage that kind of collaboration. To repeat the point, there are islands of real excellence in R&D in Greece, right across different areas. What is missing, and it comes back to the point about opportunity, what is missing here is the effectiveness of public support for that collaboration between research and the private sector. Thank you.
Well, Nick, I think that you've come to a point where you are looked by younger Greeks as a role model. You know, you're a pro by now, so everybody thinks that they have to do the things that you did to become successful. Okay, I would not like to simplify things, but what are some of the things that you would advise aspiring Greek entrepreneurs who are just starting out?
Well, I'm not certain I can give any valuable advice to anyone. I think, first of all, that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Yes, I don't think we should advise people to move into entrepreneurship. You know, entrepreneur is born and you get it in your DNA. You will move by yourself without expecting any advice to do this. But what we heard from Mr. Fletcher, I think is the most valuable advice anyone could have on starting and running the business. That's his whole speech is the whole advice anyone can have on starting and running this thing. I can't add anything to that. You know, the need for leadership, the need for discipline, the need to being able to accept partners, either investors or other critical players who will help you to build the business, to grow it. This is the advice you need. And I think the most critical, you know, personality trait someone can have is the need for personal development. You know, to try to develop yourself every single day. A lot of reading, a lot of advice, a lot of talking with other people who've done this before. The need to feel that you're not good enough and you need to be better every day. I think that's the most critical part of your personality that will drive your success. And I would also like to comment on Mr. Featherstone's, response on R&D. I can tell you from personal experience that we try to do R&D a lot with our company. We need to invest in artificial intelligence and machine learning because we face a lot of pressure from our competition in these areas. As a CEO, you may understand that I have a lot of priorities, but my top priority right now is to hire top talent in R&D in these technologies. I can tell you, we're desperate. We can't find any talent here. We're desperate. There's no way we can find. And what we did, I regret to say that we just opened an engineering hub in Amsterdam in order to find this talent, because at the end of the day, we have to execute. And there's this, the damage that has been done in the Greek society with the brain drain that we saw before and everything that's taken place. I don't know how can we restore it, but it's big. And I have no solution to that. I have no answer how to restore it, but it's a really big problem. We can't find the talent we need to do the R&D, to do the right things, to grow the business. And we outsource our needs to other countries. And yes, that's my let's say, gray perspective on this matter.
Well, thank you. Nikolaos, you introduced ideas such as impact investment or a new role for NGOs, a new way to fill the gap between the public sector and the private world. How can one go about introducing such concepts in an economy like the Greek one, where we really have to start from the beginning? Is it something that we as funders, as supporters of entrepreneurship can do?
Well, first of all, I would like to say it's not so much about filling a gap, but as I said, I think we're shifting towards an economy where value is defined not just in monetary and financial terms, but more holistically also in social and environmental terms. And we're moving from a way where it used to be either or. Now it's generally accepted that it's as well as, and very quickly we're moving to a point where I think you won't be allowed to make a profit as a business if you can't demonstrate that you also have social and environmental impact. And therefore, I think the role of NGOs or philanthropists is not so much about filling a gap, but NGOs in particular are the ones whose mission it is to create social and environmental value, so therefore they are already operating under this new paradigm. And as in every paradigm shift, when you're ahead of the curve, it feels difficult, going against the grain. This is like the internet in 1992. But if you wanted to be there for the party in 97, 98, you had to be there in 1992. So hang in there, I think. And I think in particular, NGOs can start, and there's significant opportunity I see here in Greece, because there is quite a lively small NGO scene. It's not big players. So I think resourcing these NGOs who have domain expertise in whatever they do, and marine biology, for instance, was mentioned, the World Wildlife Fund, one of these centers about restoring marine ecosystems is here in Greece with the World Wildlife Fund within the network. So I think that's, and there's very interesting small fisheries projects and ecotourism projects, which I think could serve as role models elsewhere, and I'd like to explore that further, but also in the social context. So one of the partners that Paul mentioned is the Impact Hub in Athens. I work out of the Impact Hub in Vienna. The Impact Hub network is a network of social business acceleration and incubation spaces with around 100 branches across the world and 15,000 and more social entrepreneurs in the network. And there's some really interesting initiatives like the restoration of both on the very municipal level of Kypseli market in Athens, and various businesses like the ones that Paul mentioned, in particular around food and sustainable food, sustainable products, consumer products, which are produced here in Greece. And when you have significant issues, there's also a lot of people who rise to these issues and see the solving of these issues as an opportunity through creation of jobs. And that's one difference, for instance, that I see here in Greece. Job creation across the whole of Central and Eastern Europe, like we work also in the Western Balkans, where we also have 50-60% youth unemployment, is an issue. But what's interesting is that you can almost follow the route of the refugees, because then that issue is kind of overlaid over job creation and integration. So there's various ways and various interesting initiatives how social issues can be addressed, and I think I see that a lot more as an opportunity than filling a gap and trying to plug things up, because I think our world is shifting in that direction.
Well, thank you. Now, Paul, you described the work that the People's Trust is doing. I think one of the most important, most interesting things that we are more and more seeing of at the People's Trust is that this change of paradigm among the Greeks at the time of crisis. The Greek economy has, the Greek employment has for many years been based on the public sector. The dream of the average Greek person was to find a job at the public sector. So in a way, what we're seeing is a slight gradual change of paradigm. And I would like to ask you, what is the type of support that we have to give to those people to support their own transformation? Because entrepreneurship in Greece has had negative, has been viewed under a negative light for many years. So we have to find a way to convince those people that it's worth trying.
Yeah, and I think the good news about it is that, as I said before, I think it's close to 1.5 million, 1.3 million people between the ages of, if I'm not mistaken, 18 to 64 have already tried to go into entrepreneurship in some form or other in Greece, and that's a new shift. We're moving now, not necessarily because of market opportunity, but because of need. There's a lot of people that need to work. They're not able to be employed, and so they're looking for solutions to create their own jobs and entrepreneurship. And I think that that need is one shift, but I think we're also seeing sort of a new paradigm, which is that I can create a business, I can start to work for myself and be successful. It's difficult in Greece, and that's why we're there, because there are a lot of obstacles, finance being one of them, but also education, capacity building. There isn't at this point in time, there are a lot of hubs, a lot of accelerators that have started up in the past few years. And that's a very positive fact in Greece. When I was starting out, as I said, in 2011, when we had our startup, one of the issues there was that we had no support network, and we were very much on our own. And I think Nikos will probably attest to that it was a very difficult time. And one of the reasons I got into this is because that network needed to be built up. And I think we're seeing a much stronger network of accelerators and now also investors in startups. And that's going to help the whole, I think, business and entrepreneurship scene.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, you've worked in many countries, and you mentioned before that you have invested in a company in Greece. And I wanted to ask you whether this was something associated with the time of the crisis or before that, and how much did the Greek crisis affect your own decision?
Thank you. No, there was absolutely nothing, no correlation between Greek crisis and our investment, and it was a point I made a little earlier. If I reflect, my journey to lead a emerging markets private equity firm had a major challenge in it. I had to go to institutional investors around the world and say, please, will you put your money into some of the world's most difficult countries? Discuss. So if you're sitting in the middle of the United States, the prejudice is that putting money into Tanzania, Egypt, Brazil, India is much less of a good idea than putting your money into domestic USA. And so it is with Greece. The issue is, putting money into Greece does not seem like the greatest idea if you sort of listen to the economic statistics. If I hear the emotion about regulatory burden, government inefficiency, etc. So when does it become a good idea? To repeat, it becomes a good idea if you have a good and robust business that is well led within the economy. Is that a possibility within Greece? Of course it is. One investment doesn't make us a data set or indeed a pattern, but it's certainly good enough for me. And my experience set here says across many, many difficult countries, there are always good businesses that are there to be invested in. And to push the point a little further, if indeed you fear investing in a difficult country because government has had election and they've elected some person you didn't much like, the central bank governor is somebody, who's put in place some taxes you don't much like, etc. None of these are reasons why your investment may not be a good investment. Your investment may have to tack against the wind for a while, but if it's robust, it does well. Back to my Egyptian story, we invested in that post the arrival of President Morsi. We put our money in it 4 weeks before he was thrown out. And on we went. And when we took our money out, which it went very freely out of the investment, all was good. It had been a good ride. So if the invitation is to say our money came into Greece because of a crisis, no, it may have come into Greece because the price was good that we paid for the investment, and that's normal. And I'd encourage everyone to think that that's a normal position for businesses in Greece to be in. They're going to have to attract equity in at an attractive price. That's just normal business.
Thank you. Do we have time for questions, like one or two? Okay, so any questions?
I've got a fairly loud voice. Anyway, my just wanted to make an observation, really, which comes from an interesting note that you just made about entrepreneurship. And as a professor of entrepreneurship, I'd agree. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone. I think that the challenge in Greece is that we lack entrepreneurialism, which is not the same thing as entrepreneurship in terms of running your own business. And my concern is that not only the rhetoric of the crisis, but mostly the rhetoric getting out of the crisis is pushing us headstrong in the wrong direction. We think that the crisis happened for some exogenous reason, and we're now heard the Prime Minister say, it's all great, and now we're going to be post-crisis, and we're going to do something. Who God knows what that something is. Presumably, because we had no details, it's the same thing that we've always been doing. And that means that you're going to have a university, which is increasingly going back to the 80s, that is going to give you a job, which is probably going to be secured by the government. And if it's not secured by the government, it's going to be in a firm where you're going to have a career and you're going to have a pension. Guess what? That's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen not because Greece is changing, but the economics of the world is changing. So I think that if we start shifting from entrepreneurship, where we already are seeing a sea change in terms of people interested in it, to entrepreneurialism, which is why we don't get employees, and you see most of the entrepreneurial scene complaining that they have to outsource outside Greece in order to grow their ventures, then we're going to start addressing it. And if we think that the mode of production that we've had put us in the trouble, and it absolutely can't bloody get us out of the trouble, then I think that we may start going ahead. But that means really addressing not only the public problem, but also the perception that career structures can stay as they are. And I think that we need to confront it straight on. So more of a reaction, I guess, to your comment than a question itself.
Hello, my name is Evangelia Panagiotakis. I was favored by the destiny to have a scholarship in Bamberg University in Germany, and I study international relationships. I address my question to Mr. Featherstone and Mr. Hutter, and I would like to ask, people here in Greece don't know about what is holistic perception. And because I am very Fabian, that started from London School of Economics, I would like to ask, do you think it would be helpful if we make mindfulness cabinets here and to start from internalization to make people know what it is holistic? Because this is, now we believe in dualism, and that's why there are gaps. But if there is no dualism and we have holistic perception, we don't have any gap to fill. Thank you.
Well, it's a quick question to Mr. Fletcher. Why haven't you not done more investments in Greece?
Let's start with the previous one.
Do you want to take the previous one, Nicholas, first?
Yes. So I think it would probably help. I think the great risk with all this stuff about social enterprise and mindfulness and holistic, etc., is that it's very easy to dismiss it out of hand as some hippie shit. Yeah. So I would be skeptical with that. For that reason, but also because it's happening anyway. And in particular in countries that have gone through difficult times, like in Greece, and I see the same phenomenon in Africa, working with people in the Democratic Republic of Congo or Uganda, etc., and in Central and Eastern Europe, where mindfulness as a concept has not been on the agenda or any of holistic thinking up until about maybe 2, 3, 5 years ago. Yeah? So I think it's happening anyway, and yes, it would probably help, but there's a risk to it that mainstream or traditionally minded business people dismiss this out of hand and say this is some esoteric stuff, and therefore dismiss the whole idea as such. I used to manage an impact investor network, and one of our biggest members, and they're managing close to 3-digit million euros now out of Belgium. They started out with a mindfulness focus out of a very pragmatic reason that they say companies that are focused on mindfulness and really integrate that, they make better businesses, and they had some really hard numbers to support that. Yeah.
It's a brief answer to your question. Why have we not invested in Greece? I'm afraid it's because I had a dream. The dream was to build a very big investment firm. The problem with a very big investment firm is that the amount of money that you can invest in single investments goes up. And so the single investment amount, it became too big, really.
Day. It's going to be a long day. Thank you very much on behalf of the People's Trust for being here. Also, there is a booklet about the People's Trust here. You could get a copy on your way out. Thank you again so much.